So you've got a brand new side-by-side. Do you drive it like you stole it? We're going to talk a little bit about the first 20 hours of ownership of our Kubota Sidekick and our theories on break-in and all of those things. And we want to get your opinion. So stick around for this video while we do our first 20-hour maintenance and we grease everything up, get to know our machine. Well, hey there, hobby homesteaders. Welcome back to Peaks Peak. Today, I am in the shop with the Kubota Sidekick because it's already time for our first maintenance. Now, I may have taken a little bit of speed shine to the hood so that it would look shiny for the video, but don't let that fool you. We have put the Kubota Sidekick to work, and we've learned a few things about it along the way. So today, I'm going to share with you the maintenance that you have to do at the 20-hour mark on the Kubota Sidekick, and then I'm going to talk about the things that we've learned since we've owned this Kubota Sidekick. We have definitely got to put it to work and figure out the things that we like and a couple of things that you kind of have to get used to or figure out. So we're going to share with you our first impressions of the Kubota Sidekick today after we've put about 90 miles or so on it and 20 hours. Now, to check your hours, you turn the key on but do not start the machine and it will display the hours on the screen. And then when you start it, it switches to mileage. So we have 87.5 miles. And the first thing I'll tell you is I had this thing cleaned up and pulled in here at 20 hours on the dot to do my first oil change. And we had some unexpected progress take place on Peaks Peak that night that caused me to have to get this out and use it instead of doing that maintenance. So I had to clean it up again and bring it back in the shop. And you'll have to forgive the background noise today because it's raining, and rainy days mean shop days here on Peaks Peak. So that's what we're doing today. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing up on the lift, kind of check things out. We are going to change the oil today, which is the only thing that's required at the 20-hour mark. Then we're also going to look for all the grease fittings we can find and grease those up. You want to grease everything on a regular basis. It's got grease points on the control arms and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to look around and grease all that stuff up as well. Kind of do an inspection, make sure everything's hanging in there the way that we think it is, and we'll share with you our thoughts while we do all that. All right, guys, well, you should be able to tell by underneath that we have put the Kubota Sidekick to use. No doubt. And everything underneath here is covered really well with skid plates and all that. And you have access holes for, like, there's your drain for your front diff and your oil drain plug hole, and I'm assuming a drain for your rear diff there. Yeah, underneath all them leaves and mud and all that. There you go. So this is what we look like underneath. And you know, there are all different kinds of people. There are people that own side-by-sides that you can see them on their channels. Everything looks pristine and it's kept perfectly clean and shined up, and that's not the kind of people we are. Now, I'm not abusing this machine, but we use it every single day driving up and down our hill. Our hill is muddy, and of course you can see I track a lot of dirt in the garage because of it. We use it every day, and it takes a good 30 minutes to even begin to wash the thing and clean all the mud out and all of that. So there's no way that every day we could clean that up. So if you want to know where you can get real information about how a machine is being used and how it's going to hold up, if you really use it, keep an eye on us because that's what we do here. Now, I know our control arms, you can see we've got grease fittings on our control arms here that we're going to hit. So I'm going to kind of familiarize myself with this and find all the grease fittings. We'll hit everything that we can find to hit. I might even take a look at the manual and see what it says. But we'll grease everything up that we can find, and we're going to change the oil real quick. A couple of interesting things about this machine and what it requires for oil that I want to share with you. Now, I have the stuff behind me to change the oil on my machine. And you may be wondering how a jug of Rotella T has gotten into the mix here. We run Rotella T4 in our Kubota BX subcompact tractor. And I gathered up all the stuff to do the oil changes on both of these machines. And what I found interesting is that the Kubota BX and the Kubota Sidekick use the exact same oil filter. So that's one thing to make things just a little bit simpler if you own both pieces of equipment. The other thing that I found interesting about the oil change on this Kubota Sidekick is it actually runs 0W40 motor oil. So it's supposed to be good for all temperature ranges and all that. You know, I've had OW20 oil in some of our cars, but I've never ran OW40 in anything. So I went ahead and picked that up at the Kubota dealer while I was there. So we're gonna go ahead and get this oil changed. Got a 14 mil socket on there. Not too tight. Well, that looks like some pretty clean oil. Now, obviously, the purpose behind changing the oil after 20 hours is not because the oil is used up or burn up or anything like that, but rather because you're breaking in an engine and you have parts that are wearing in, like rings that are wearing into the cylinders and all that, you're gonna have little metal particles in your oil, and the filter's gonna catch those and gather them up, but in break-in, that's when you're gonna have the most of that. So you're going to want to change the oil after 20 hours for that reason right there. So we'll let this go ahead and drain out real good, mainly because the drain plug slid up in the skid plate there and I won't be able to get to it. So we'll let that drain real good until it quits dripping. So now I mentioned the reason for changing the oil after 20 hours, and that kind of brings up a discussion that I want to have with you guys and just ask your opinion on this, because, you know, breaking in a new engine, there's all kinds of different theories about how to do that. And, you know, owner's manuals will tell you, don't hold a steady RPM, never run it wide open in the first so many hours or miles or whatever. So there are different theories about all of that. So how do you break in a brand new engine? Do you run it like you're gonna run it? Do you make sure that you never run it full throttle, follow the manufacturer's recommendations in the manual as closely as you can? I'll see if I can find those in the book and see if it says anything about how to break in the engine. I know there are lots and lots of people who go by the theory of just run it how you're going to run it, and that's what's going to break it into the kind of use that you're going to be using it for. I've done a lot with engines, and I've had a lot of new engines over my lifespan, and I'll just be honest with you, I always just run them how I'm going to run them. You know, maybe the first little bit, take it easy, you know, the first hour or two, just because it's a new machine, you got to get used to it and all of that. But for the most part, I start it up, let it warm up, and then drive it. And that's kind of how I've always treated my new equipment, and I'd be interested to hear what your theories are about that. Do not operate the vehicle at full speed for the first 50 hours. Doesn't give an explanation as to why or what it will cause if you drive it at full speed in the first 50 hours. But it also says, do not start quickly nor apply the brakes suddenly. In winter, operate the vehicle after fully warming up the engine. Do not run the engine at speeds faster than necessary. On rough roads, slow down to suitable speeds. Do not operate the vehicle at fast speed. The above precautions are not only limited to new vehicles, but to all vehicles. But it should be especially observed in the case of new vehicles. Now, here is what I find interesting about this. They're giving you all of these guidelines as far as not operating it at full speed in the first 50 hours, not starting or stopping quickly. Then it says, this is true not only for new vehicles, but for all vehicles. And I believe these recommendations have a lot to do with becoming oriented with your vehicle as much as the components breaking in and getting started. Now, I could be wrong on that, and I'd be interested to hear your theories. But in general, I think for the most part, these are recommendations to keep you safe and let you get used to the vehicle before you start ramping it up and doing more and more and going faster and all of those things. Like I said, this is not a recommendation. This is just my theory, and I'd like to hear yours. Snugged up our drain plug. Do not over tighten it. All right, so the first thing we gotta grease is the actual parking brake lever pivot. And then the moving parts of the diff lock lever. So this is the pedal right here. So I want to take care of the greasing on everything that is a little more difficult to access from the ground, and clean off all these grease fittings on the A-arms and stuff. A few of the things are just like pivots that you use any kind of spray grease. So, you know, WD-40, Deep Creep made by Seafoam, that's what we have over there, but I actually just broke the cap off of it, so the only spray lubricant I had left was some Walmart SuperTech spray, so that's what we're using today. And the greasing is recommended to be done every 50 hours, but you pretty much can't over grease. And we operate in a pretty muddy environment, and the manual actually says grease daily if you operate in a dirty, muddy environment. And I'll show you why if I can still catch it on camera. Like this pivot right here, I don't know if you can see those water droplets. But when I greased that A-arm right there, it squirted water out, which tells you that there's, you know, a little bit of penetration of contaminants, dirt, mud, whatever, that can get in there. And so this helps to kind of clean it out, push that stuff out, and replace it with grease that's going to protect it. All right, let's head on to the back. We got, there's basically 3 points on the control arms that you grease. 2 on the bottom, 1 on the top. So on the bottom and over there on the bottom, and then 1 on top in the center there. Now back here on the control arms, there are actually 4 points to grease. Okay, now we have 1 more grease point over here on the driver's side, and this is like a pillow block bearing or whatever. So we can get back in here to it. There we go. All right. All right, guys, I think we are ready to put it on the ground because we have some other things to grease that are up, like the bed pivots, and up inside the hood is the, you know, gear shift lever linkage. That needs sprayed down. So we'll lower it down, we'll grease those things, and then we'll get to the oil filter, get that checked out. So we get spray right back up in there, and then there's a hole right through here. Set you guys up to where you can see it move. Spray that. Now we are ready to get this thing filled up with oil and change the oil filter. Let's find it. Pretty sure you go in this way. And there we are. All right, let's get this oil filter off of here. Now, a couple of little things that I noticed here. Well, first, make sure you get clean oil, lubricate your O-ring there, or you'll have trouble getting this off the next time you go to change it. And you tighten these down till the rubber touches, and then go another half a turn. And hand tight is plenty tight on those. Now, one of the things that I noticed is that this replacement oil filter is a little bit shorter than the one that came on it from the factory, so don't be alarmed by that. All right, the other thing that surprised me is here's your engine oil dipstick underneath the seat. And the whole time so far, I was looking at the transmission fluid dipstick back there thinking that was the engine oil. So just be aware. Now, in really looking at this, it should have been obvious that this was the transmission dipstick because of the way everything is oriented. But just taking a glance under here, you see a big yellow dipstick. You kind of assume that's going to be your engine oil. We still have plenty of transmission fluid in it, so that's good. So let's get this thing topped off with oil. While this holds 4 quarts of oil, I mentioned you use OW40. And the OW40 is actually, because it covers basically the whole range of temperature that you need to cover. We use Fahrenheit in the US. It's like -4 up to 104 degrees that 0W40 is good for. Most of the other viscosities don't cover that wide of a temperature range. Then we'll check our oil real quick. We are dead on full, looking good. So we'll go ahead and put our seat trays back in. And that's pretty well going to do it. We went through and I got everything greased up, got our oil changed, kind of inspected everything. Everything looks great. I'm real happy with the machine. Now, I said I would mention a couple of things that it kind of had to get used to and all of that. I'm not so sure that they haven't gotten better over time. The first thing I noticed when we got it was shifting it into gear. Sometimes you couldn't get it to go into high range or couldn't get it to go into low. You would have to maybe put it in reverse and back up just a little and then try to go into high because everything was really stiff and tight. I also have noticed that it has gotten better as the things seem to break in, and I think probably, you know, the spray lubes and all that we did just now will help that even more. I'll hit this gear. Yeah, see the movement of that. It's pretty good right now. And it didn't always bind up, but it was just kind of one of those things that occasionally did and made you wonder how it was going to work out, but it seems to be loosening up. Overall, aside from that, I can't really think of any complaints that I have. Now, maybe I'm kind of in that honeymoon phase where it's just so great to have that I'm not noticing any of the other things. I will mention, several people have asked me about how touchy the throttle is, because apparently the Kubota Sidekick has a reputation of being very touchy. And what I'll say about that is, one, I heard that they made some improvements to the 2023 model to make that better, and it must have worked because I haven't really noticed an issue. I will say, I always have my son drive it in low range, like up the hill and all of that, because I don't want him going real fast, and I think it would probably be harder on the belt and all of that if you're running in high range slowly up the hill. So in low range, it is pretty jumpy, and he's kind of just learning to drive, so he's on and off the throttle and it jerks you around quite a bit. So that may be kind of what we're talking about, but I think most experienced drivers, there is enough give in the pedal that it's not too sensitive. So I'm pretty happy with that overall. The Kubota Sidekick is a work-oriented machine. It's fun, it's plenty fast enough for us to have a good time running up and down the hill and all of that. But I will say it's probably less performance-oriented and more work-oriented if I was gonna lean one way or the other, because, you know, it's a little bit lower ground clearance. We have some places where we'll bottom out just a little bit if we're not careful. And I've heard some great remedies for that, like a 2-inch lift and maybe some 28-inch mud tires, and you know, on and on and on the list goes. You can do pretty much anything you want to upgrade these machines, and we may do some of that over time. But all in all, I have no complaints with the machine so far. It's performing flawlessly, It runs great. We are using it a lot and getting a lot of good out of it. We're super glad that we bought it. Well guys, I hope that you enjoyed today's shop day. I had a good time just kind of going over the machine, checking things out. And hey, I had somebody ask me the other day, had I scratched it up yet? And honestly, I don't think we have. We've been pretty easy on it going through the trails, and we've rubbed the rails on trees and rubbed the roof on trees. I even popped one of these caps off getting up against a tree, turning a corner, and I remembered rubbing that tree, so when I got in here and the cap was gone, I knew where it was. So we drove back up there and got it and popped it back in. We've put it to work. We're using it. No issues, no complaints so far. Guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget, get outside and enjoy God's creation. It's beautiful out there. Y'all have a good day.